Kiyotaka Ayanokoji, Johan Liebert, and last but definitely not least, Yagami. All three of these characters are very popular in the anime community, most notably for their intelligence and their unique style of manipulation. The topic of who's smarter is always heavily debated on, but as I just suggested, we're going to be comparing these three under a different category, that being manipulation. Let's see how each of these three do against one another. Ayanokoji, although well known, is one of the newer manipulators in the anime community. This isn't to underrate him in any way, however, as his way of manipulation has allowed him to succeed time and time again without ever lifting a finger. In Volume 2 of Classroom of the Elite, Ayanokoji is faced with a serious dilemma. His classmate Sudo has been accused of starting a fight with students from Class 1C, and it's up to Ayanokoji to prove his innocence. The morally correct but longer method will be to gather substantial evidence to not only prove Sudo innocent, but knock out any claim that Class 1C has against Sudo. However, Ayanokoji likes to go for the most efficient and logical methods. So what does he do? Ayanokoji formulates a strategy. He had the idea to fabricate a lie with the hidden cameras, which he set up later on. He took Horikita to the building where Sudo and the Class C students were and made her indirectly realize that there were no cameras. Ayanokoji then guides Horikita to the idea of inventing false evidence so that they could pass the truth from lies. But to make this stick, Ayanokoji would need help. Enter Ichinose, a student that Ayanokoji helped way earlier in the volume. Now, as for why exactly Ayanokoji helped Ichinose, there really isn't a clear-cut answer. But it's most likely the fact that he saw the potential of forming a good relationship with Class B. So by helping its leader, she'd be in his debt. And of course, Ichinose is a genuinely kind-hearted person and wouldn't hesitate to return the favor. But back to Ayanokoji's strategy. He gets Ichinose's help to negotiate with Class C students and make them think that the cameras were actually there when they initially fought against Sudo. Ayanokoji and Ichinose then threatened the Class C students with expulsion if they didn't admit their lie in front of the student council. Ayanokoji was also sure to use the setting to his advantage, so that he could indirectly put psychological pressure on the students and make them feel as if they had no chance to escape the situation, because they had no evidence to prove that the cameras weren't there. According to Ayanokoji, one's ability to think, that is to say, to concentrate, decreases as heat increases. One cannot exhibit sufficient logical, creative thinking outside of a comfortable environment. The more content you cram into your head, the more your brain will overload. The heat had compromised the Class C students' ability to think. They'd been in crisis mode, without a chance to relax. In addition, they'd felt psychologically threatened during that standoff due to Ichinose and Ayanokoji. There was no way that they would have figured out that Ayanokoji and Ichinose were really bluffing. Even if they doubted it, they'd had no time to investigate and would have been thrown out of the school if the claims were true. With this single strategy, Ayanokoji not only demonstrates his understanding of human psychology, but is also able to use the environment to his advantage. By literally using the weather to cloud one's judgment, he'd be able to gaslight multiple students into thinking their academic career is over. To explain, a white knight is someone who tries to protect a person of interest, but in manipulation, it's used far more sinisterly. White knight manipulation is when a person portrays themselves as a hero or savior in order to gain power or control over others. In actuality, however, the situation in which the victim needed to be saved from was directly engineered by the white knight. This tactic is often used in romantic or personal relationships, but can also be used in business or social situations. We see Ayanokoji deploy this method when he forms a strategy to gain Kei's absolute cooperation. To begin, we see Ayanokoji observing Kei early on in Volume 4. He knows something is wrong with her, but can't quite pinpoint it. In the previous volume, it was Ibuki who stole Kei's underwear, which caused her a lot of emotional distress. And one would think that the logical thing to do would be to comfort the person and become angry. But Kei, however, just let it go. What's even more weird is that Kei is known for her headstrong personality, as she's the leader of the girls in Class 1D. Someone with Kei's influence and personality wouldn't let something that serious slide, but for some reason, Kei did. Strike 1. During the Zodiac exam, Ayanokoji is in a group with Kei and Manabe. It turns out that Kei was bullying Manabe's friends. Manabe wanted to take a picture of Kei to confirm if it was really her, but then her entire temperament switches. Ayanokoji directly states that, "I thought that Karizawa would have entered Manabe more forcefully, but her words were surprisingly weak, or rather, there was some fear mixed in with her tough girl act. It might have been my imagination though." That's strike 2. The final nail in the coffin is when Ayanokoji witnesses Kei and Hirata's breakup, but Ayanokoji doesn't buy it. He directly talks to Hirata to confirm his suspicions, as he states he believes the two of them were never really dating to begin with. He points out the fact that despite both of them dating for 4 months, their relationship visually hasn't progressed. They don't hold hands, they call each other by their last names instead of their first names, and they're not affectionate at all. Ayanokoji then concludes that Kei got into a fake relationship with Hirata to improve her social standing and to protect herself. Hirata confirms this, and Ayanokoji subsequently gains Hirata's full cooperation and trust. He just needs Manabe's contact information, which Hirata already has access to due to his large social network. Ayanokoji has everything he needs and moves forward with his strategy. First, we need to recap all the observations that Ayanokoji has made regarding Kei's true personality. Normally, Kei's outside personality was that of a headstrong girl who took on the leadership role for her large group of friends. However, in these observations, Kei was instead more neutral and didn't offer anything of substance to these discussions, which went against the profile Ayanokoji had created for her. Ayanokoji also noted how Hirata would always act like Hirata and Kushida like Kushida, but it wasn't for Kei. This just shows how good Ayanokoji is at reading people's emotions and noticing changes in their character. At the same time, Manabe and her lackeys were attempting to interrogate Kei about whether she pushed their friend Rika. While she faced them, Ayanokoji noticed further discrepancies with her fake personality during the scene, and she was hyperventilating and looked like she was going through shock. After this encounter, Ayanokoji directly manipulates Manabe and her friends by feeding them false information about Kei getting into fights with other people. This is used to confirm their initial suspicions on their own perception of Kei's character, which caused them to take even more action. After the group discussion ended, Manabe and her group caught up to Kei at a stairwell, and Ayanokoji observed her nearly break down in front of them as they taunted her. Later on that night, Ayanokoji was a witness to Kei and Hirata's breakup, where he was informed that the relationship was fake. He then learns the truth from Hirata that Kei was bullied in her younger years. At the same time, Ayanokoji also gained confirmation from Hirata that she was the rabbit group's VIP. This gave Ayanokoji multiple forms of ammunition to use against Kei, her parasitic nature, which he learned of when he deduced that Kei had been using Hirata to improve her social standing and keep herself protected. Her past of being bullied and knowledge of her being the VIP, which Ayanokoji suspected beforehand. Now, we can actually get into the strategy itself. First, Ayanokoji had Hirata tell Kei through text to meet up at the ship's lowest level at 4 p.m. This was convenient to Ayanokoji for the added fact that there was little to no service at the bottom floor, meaning Kei wouldn't be able to contact anyone upon going down. Ayanokoji also gained Manabe's contact information through Hirata, and he states that even if Hirata hadn't been able to give him the info, he would have gotten it from Kushida. With Manabe's contact information in hand, he sent her a text message under a sub-account, which grants him a thin veil of protection. Through their text messages, Ayanokoji lies to Manabe by saying that he hates Kei and wants revenge on her. He then informs Manabe that Kei would be at the ship's lowest level alone, which would allow them to do whatever they wished to her. Ayanokoji relays to Manabe that without this opportunity, she wouldn't gain another chance to attack Kei because she had both Machida and Hirata protecting her. Ayanokoji also brings up the event that he and Yukimura witnessed the day before, that being Manabe and her lackeys bullying Kei. He then mentions that Kei was completely wary after it. In Manabe's suspicion, she claims that she would show the chat logs to the school. Ayanokoji responded by giving her the false illusion that he wouldn't break her trust because of how badly he was risking himself by contacting her directly. Now you may be wondering, what would Ayanokoji have done if Manabe avoided to help him? For the sake of the plot, he was able to succeed, but putting that aside, there's a chance that she could have shown these texts to the administration, which Ayanokoji claims would have got him in serious trouble. However, even if Manabe were to avoid Ayanokoji's help, he would instead directly blackmail Manabe through pictures he had taken of her assaulting Kei on the stairwell. Ayanokoji then gives Manabe the information that Kei had been a victim of bullying in the past, which allowed Manabe to completely break her down for him unknowingly. During Manabe and Kei's confrontation, Ayanokoji notes how similar it is to the milligram experiment, which shows more of Ayanokoji's psychological knowledge. Finally, we get to the results of what Ayanokoji has been doing thus far. After Manabe and her friends left, Ayanokoji capitalized on Kei's emotional condition and made direct contact with her himself. Ayanokoji took advantage of the environment's effect on her mind to close the psychological distance between them to allow her to calm down. He then lied to her by claiming that Hirata had been called by a teacher and decided to go in his place. Ayanokoji then revealed to her how much he knew about her past. As Ayanokoji told her everything he knew, he threatened to force himself on her in order to scope just how far she would be willing to go to protect herself. When Kei told Ayanokoji about her past, he saw through her and knew that she was hiding an extra factor that made her so afraid. He noticed her eye movement and followed it to reveal her scar, which could be considered a form of cold reading. Once Ayanokoji gained the information he needed, he explained to Kei that he would protect her in Hirata or Machida's instead, and proved this by showing her the photo he took of Manabe's group assault on the stairway. After Ayanokoji revealed this, he explained to her that he needed her influence in order to create a cohesion within their class, and mentioned his knowledge of Karizawa's identity as a VIP. Here, Ayanokoji gained not only the complete cooperation of Karizawa through blackmail and proof that he could protect her, he also reads, manipulates, and gets blackmail on Manabe, which he would use later on in Year 1, 4, and 5. To sum it all up, Ayanokoji set up a situation similar to the milligram experiment, a psychological study from the 1960s to manipulate the behavior of Manabe's group and Karizawa. He uses his knowledge of human psychology and social dynamics to create a scenario where Manabe and Rika take revenge on Karizawa, who had wronged them before. To be able to replicate a scenario similar to the milligram experiment in a school environment gives us this framework of Ayanokoji's understanding. Ayanokoji displays a deep understanding of human psychology, exploiting emotions, understanding of emotions triggers, and motivations to achieve his desired outcome. It also shows nuanced comprehension of how individuals react in certain situations. He effectively controls the interactions between Manabe, Karizawa, and Rika. With that, he recognized Rika's enjoyment in tormenting Karizawa as a means of asserting power or coping with personal frustration. He understood her evolving stance, influenced by the situation, from initial reluctance to activate participation due to the authority of Manabe. This shows his awareness of the complex interplay of power dynamics, personal satisfaction, and social influence. When an authority figure, Manabe, took responsibility for the act and the consequences, Rika would give in to her subconscious desire to get back at Karizawa and hurt her. They kept on hurting Karizawa without stopping, as there was neither an authority that prohibited their behavior, nor any negative reinforcement. Rather, they gained positive reinforcement from the sobbing, screams, and pathetic display of the usual headstrong Karizawa. Ayanokoji's setup allows Manabe and Rika to take out their frustration on Karizawa, who becomes a victim of their aggression. He indirectly manipulated their emotions and actions in his preparation to achieve his desired outcome to take control of Karizawa. While Karizawa went from feeling disgust and ignorance to seeing Ayanokoji as her host, this is not enough to gain complete control over her. If she were to be concerned in some way, she might still backstab Ayanokoji. To prevent that, he aims to create a genuine trust and an emotional bond between them that Karizawa wouldn't break. At the same time, he uses her to make Class D a class competent enough to stand its own ground against the other classes. This includes eliminating the weaknesses of his classmates by nurturing self-improvement/development. Ayanokoji gradually introduces changes in behavior and expectations, shaping her into a more compliant and cooperative ally. These would start slowly with things such as no bullying of other classmates or not using too much money on clothes. Ayanokoji's aura was so reassuring to Karizawa that she would spill anything about her past without knowing actually why. From acting like a gloomy person with bad social skills, he can present the traits that are the polar opposite. Up until now, she'd only ever seen him as a lowly, unobstructive guy. Seeing his true self must have terrified her. The less he talked, the more terrifying he would appear, the less she would resist. And even in times where Karizawa doesn't want to cooperate with him, like pool incident in Year 1 Volume 4.5, Ayanokoji is easily able to make her willingly cooperate by herself by explaining that she's an important asset to him and how much more trustworthy she is in comparison to other people, especially Horikita. The reason for that is that Karizawa felt inferior to Horikita in some ways, so that it gave her a great feeling when she hears Ayanokoji's words. Through Karizawa, he was also able to gain much more insight into his classmates, such as suspecting that Hirata hides something from everyone. He doesn't believe Hirata's placement in Class D had been the consequence of a friend's suicide attempt. This wouldn't be the only reason ANHS would assign a highly intelligent and immensely popular student to Class D. It would have been understandable if Hirata had poor attendance or low grades like Karizawa, but not even a past trauma equates to placement in Class D. To sum it all up, Ayanokoji's method of manipulation is unique to say the least. He uses the environment, past trauma, and a plethora of methods to his advantage, the most notable one being the white knight tactic. He uses actual social psychology experiments and conveniently applies them to his current situation, as shown with the reference to the milligram experiment, a study conducted at Yale University from 1961 to 1962. Ayanokoji's knowledge of psychology was gained from the White Room, so it's no wonder that despite lacking social skills, he's able to pick up on small cues in social situations. The power of the Death Note isn't what got Light so far. Aside from Light's intellect, his emotional intelligence, charisma, and manipulation are his strongest traits. Most notably, we see him use manipulation to his advantage to achieve his goals. During the second part of Death Note, Light had Mikami conduct Kira killings to lower suspicion of himself as Kira. Mikami chose a spokesperson to spread Kira's words, which was conveniently Kiyomi Takada, Light's ex-girlfriend from college. To many, this would seem like trouble, as this mere coincidence would only reignite the suspicion that certain members of the task force had for Light. Light, however, is resourceful and quick on his feet. He's able to use situations that aren't in his favor and literally flip the script in such a way to where he's back on top. Or it seemed as if everything was going according to his plan. So, Light uses his previous relationship with Takada to his advantage. He tells everybody on the task force about their relationship for two reasons. The first is to lower Aizawa's suspicion, as Aizawa suspected that Light may try to hide the fact that he used to date Kiyomi, which if he were to do so, would hide the chances of Light being Kira in Aizawa's eyes. But by seemingly revealing the truth outright, this forces the task force to trust in Light again. The second reason is to gain control and be able to move forward with his plan with little to no resistance. By telling the task force that he used to be in a relationship with Takada, this would mean that he'd know her the best and would know how to get close to her quickly, which he does. Light then decides to set up a meeting between the two of them, and the manga actually cut out the first meeting. Before the initial meeting, they had a phone call together. Light used buzzwords such as fate and destiny, pull Takada in and convince her to meet with him. But Light didn't really have to do all this. Light could have honestly been more straightforward and Takada would have possibly still came to meet with him, but there would have been a risk of her being suspicious of him. This is why Light uses his charm to his advantage. He knows that Takada is someone with a strong sense of pride and an individual who loves attention. So, to get her attention, he needed to tickle and tease her a certain way to the point where her guard was completely lowered and she acted on emotion rather than logic. After this call, Takada meets with Light and immediately falls for him again. His good looks, maturity, calmness, and his overall aura is far too attractive to her. Light can't help but display arrogance in his monologue as he says it won't be long before Takada falls in love with him. This just goes to show how efficient Light is. Despite not seeing each other for 5 years, Light is able to not only reconnect with Takada with ease, but manipulate her to the point where she's absolutely devoted and infatuated with Light. Light meets Naomi Misora at the police station while he's trying to drop off some fresh clothes for his father. He overhears Naomi talking about the Kira case, and naturally, he's curious and decides to investigate. He speaks to the receptionist and starts off by introducing himself, followed by stating his reason for being there. The receptionist, of course, recognizes him for not only being Soichiro Yagami's son, but also being involved in helping to solve the insurance fraud murder investigation last year. It would be, of course, confusing to the viewer that someone with such a good memory like Light wouldn't recognize the receptionist or the detective work he did last year. This was a play by Light. He acted as if he didn't know the receptionist for the sole purpose of reminding Light of what he's done in front of Naomi Misora. He indirectly manipulated the receptionist to establish his credibility as a police consultant in front of Naomi Misora, his target. Letting others reveal your good qualities for you is a good way to establish respect and trust. And it makes you seem humble as you don't constantly remind everyone in the room why you're that guy. Naomi tries to contact headquarters again, but is refused. Light, out of the goodness of his heart, intervenes and offers to help Naomi by passing along the message to his dad. Again, this was also another play on Light's part. By offering to help Naomi in a desperate time of need, he was able to slowly but surely establish a certain level of trust within her. Light shares sensitive information about the case to Naomi Misora, which is a risky play. Light does this with the hopes that by sharing a secret with Naomi, she will also share one back. Light then proceeds to double down on this by telling Naomi his real name. Light's boldness works, as Naomi gives Light her real name, as well as reveals she believes Kira can kill his victims in several ways that aren't just related to heart attacks. This made Light realize that Naomi was indeed a threat and had to be dealt with, and he decided to continue working with her to learn any more information. Upon hearing of Naomi's deduction, he flatters her and says he would have never even considered that as a possibility. By doing this, he's complimenting Naomi in hopes of her softening up and feeding more information to Light. Making someone else feel superior to you will cause them to loosen up and be more inclined to share information with you. However, if you appeal to their ego too much and agree with everything they say, then naturally they will become suspicious of you. It's why when Naomi suggests someone that she knows met Kira, Light doubts that could be true, as it says anyone who walked into a building and claimed to have met Kira would be met with skepticism. This technique can also be used to instill doubt in others, or in other words, make it seem as if they're wrong. By suggesting someone is wrong naturally, they'd be inclined to prove themselves right. And how would they go about this? By bringing up more evidence to support their theory. And that is what Naomi does, by revealing to Light that her fiance was forced to reveal his ID and was controlled by Kira to reveal all the names of the FBI agents. Because the bus hijacker didn't die of a heart attack like the rest of the Kira victims, Kira was trying to hide his involvement in that case. Light then decides he needs to kill Naomi, but before he can do so, he tells Naomi they need to start investigating her theory, followed by asking if she told anyone else about her theory. This sudden urgency to agree with her theory and investigate was to mask Light's true intentions. Light wanted to make sure nobody else knew of Naomi's theory, otherwise he'd have to tie up loose ends. Once he gets confirmation she's the only one who knows, he's free to deal with her as he pleases. Light writes Naomi's name down, but she doesn't die. Light isn't visibly panicking, but there are subtle signs of discomfort that Naomi catches, such as him slowing his pace and checking his watch and going quiet due to being so filled in his thoughts. Naomi tells Light she'd like to head to the station on her own, where Light realizes he needs to calm down and figure out the next best solution to get her name. Light suddenly tells Naomi that it will be impossible for her to contact anyone from the task force directly. To reinforce his statement, he uses her case, pain, and the love of her fiancé to convince her not to do so. Naomi, however, is still naturally curious. After all, how does Light know so much about the task force? Light then reveals to Naomi that he is a member of the task force, as he goes on to say that since many detectives quit due to the fearing of their lives, he was put on the task force by L despite being a teenager. To back this up, he uses his previously established social credibility as the teenager who was able to solve an insurance fraud case just a year ago, which means he is competent enough as a detective. Light also reveals he can go to task force headquarters as he pleases and can investigate freely as he sees fit. Light covers his lie with truth, as by using the fact he is an intelligent detective, it will make sense as to why L would want him on his team. Naomi is still cautious, however, and tells Light she still wants to try and contact L on her own. She reveals to Light that she used to be an FBI agent and previously worked with L in the past. This finally gives Light something to use, and he switches his plan to convince Naomi to join the task force. Light does this by complimenting her intellect as well as making her feel special by saying, "Not everyone can do this, but you can." Light is confident that this will work because Naomi states she feels like Light and L are similar, but talking to Light reminds her of L. Light continues to build up Naomi's self-importance by stating she has far more experience than most due to being a trained FBI agent, solving a case with L in the past and qualifying with the task force standards. Light previously mentions the qualities of a task force member, which are a chosen few elite, handpicked by L, highly skilled, well-respected, and trustworthy. When reasoning with Naomi why she's a good fit for the task force, he uses similar words as before, such as "you have experience as an FBI agent," which qualifies with chosen few elite, talented and respected, which correlates with highly skilled, and L trusts her. The qualifications for the job perfectly align with Naomi's skill set. Before continuing to reel her in, by Light using the word fate, which is funnily enough a common phrase that Light uses when it comes to manipulating people, most notably women, at least in Death Note's manga. After setting everything up, Light steps back a little to not only prevent suspicion, but to give Naomi some room to breathe and make it seem as if she genuinely has a choice, thus giving her all the power. All of this accumulates to one single result. Naomi now becomes desperate to join the task force created to catch Kira. Light compliments her more before asking for a form of proper identification to proceed. Naomi gives Light her real name, which Light writes in the Death Note. This feat of Light manipulating Naomi is heavily overlooked and quite possibly one of the best feats from Light himself in terms of manipulation. This is because Light was able to turn a situation in his favor. Originally, Naomi was hesitant to talk and trust him, but within less than an hour, he was not only able to gain her trust, but also gain her real name and identification, which led to Light being able to kill her. The way that Light manipulates people is also unique, as he uses his exterior to his advantage. To explain, Light is a naturally charming individual who pulls people in with his good looks and intelligence. From there, his personality is that of an honest and hardworking student who's nice and sociable to everyone he meets. Deep down, however, Light is a narcissist who's arrogant and feels superior to his enemies, but he hides his true personality away and wears an efficient mask. To put it simply, he reels you in, keeps you hooked, and before you realize it, it's all too late. A bit similar to the last person on this list, Johan Liebert. Johan is a more special case when using his feats of manipulation. Most of his best feats tend to happen off-screen, like the time he manipulates all the adults and children at Kinderheim 511 to kill each other. However, we do get to see some feats of him manipulating people on screen, or at the very least, you can watch the scene closely to figure out it was Johan based on his previous actions. Alex says that he met Eric, a fake name that Johan went by, in a bar. Johan introduced him to the Springers, a family that Johan had personal ties with. Johan intended to use Alex to kill the Springers, as he wanted to erase all traces of his existence. The Springers had a sunflower garden, but Mr. Springer paved the garden to expand the parking lot. There was a specific reason as to why Johan chose Alex. Alex said that the sunflower garden was terrible, and Eric, Johan, took the chance and agreed to it. The fact is that Alex had a mother who died a long time ago and associates her death with sunflowers when Alex walked with his mother as a child. We also find out that Johan did a good psychoanalysis of Alex. He was able to find out that Alex's mother was a mistress, and Johan told Alex that Mr. Springer had a mistress. This immediately caused Alex to continue feeling negative emotions towards the Springers. The sunflower bed was one thing, but Mr. Springer's having a mistress when Alex Alex's mother was also the mistress of one man stuck with him. Alex goes on to say that him and Johan met several times and became good friends. Eventually, Johan ordered him to kill the Springers because he doesn't want to be part of such a family. As we see, Johan uses information to manipulate people and cause them to act on their emotions because he understands that everyone's psychology is different. And Alex, by killing the Springers, thought that he could erase his own past. And the emotional control from Johan made him think about it that way. Once the job was done, Johan also told Alex that he was no longer needed and his fate was scaled, which drove Alex to suicide. This is an amazing feat of emotional management, understanding, and manipulation. Johan was able to get close to Alex and use his past to drive him to commit murder. What's more scary is the fact that Alex was only a man with trauma/PTSD. He wasn't your typical killer or psycho. This is what makes Johan's manipulation so potent and damaging. He's able to get close to anyone he desires, befriend them, and convince them to commit morally wrong acts such as murder. One of Johan's best and most famous feats of manipulation is the manipulation of Richard Braun. Richard Braun was generally one of the more intelligent policemen in Monster's verse. His ability to use pattern recognition to solve cases was very underrated. He had a gut feeling about Johan and decided to face him head on. But this was a mistake. Richard's meeting with Johan was his first and last. Johan manipulated him to his death because Richard was getting closer to finding the truth about Johan. And so, Johan decided to visit him and deal with him. Johan and Richard then go to a bar to continue the chat. But keep in mind that Richard is at the very least suspicious of Johan and his criminal activities, and naturally means he distrusts him and is on guard. Johan, however, can slightly lower his guard by revealing the true purpose of his requesting to meet Richard. That being, he is researching the 1989 United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child for his college research paper. Johan at this point in the story was generally a college student, albeit only temporarily. Despite that, it's still enough of a legitimate reason to call out Richard. Once seated in the bar, he offers Richard a drink, who hesitantly declines. Offering Richard a drink was done intentionally, as it's known before Johan and Richard have their encounter by the viewer that Richard used to be an alcoholic. Johan knows this fact too, and it is vital in his plot to manipulate Richard Braun. Knowing people's guilty pleasures is essentially a gap in the person's psyche, which makes it all the more easier to manipulate the person if done correctly. After Richard denies Johan's offer of alcohol, Johan says he understands, and it's probably for the best, because you executed that boy while you were drunk. Johan didn't use words such as kill, murder, or guy, and instead decided to use words that have more impact, like execute or boy, which is done to instill guilt into Richard and remind him of his past actions. Johan asks this question in a way where his demeanor is non-threatening, which was done to not raise Richard's guard any further. Johan continues to use the word execute, which causes Richard to get defensive. Johan changes the subject slightly and references multiple 1989 articles centered around the rights of a child. Richard only gets more frustrated, and Johan pulls back and apologizes, as he reminds Richard this is all for the sake of a research paper. Even though Johan has reassured Richard, he's still annoyed. Johan buys a bottle of whiskey and tells Richard they should take their conversation elsewhere. The environment you're in is responsible for how you are feeling. If you are standing on the middle of a sidewalk waiting for a bus as it snows, you'll feel cold, anxious, and in a rush, as you not only want the bus to come on time, but wonder if it will ever come at all. Or maybe you're out camping with your family during the summer, but keep on getting bit by mosquitoes, which makes you feel annoyed. The key similarity in both of these scenarios is that naturally you'd want your environment to change to suit your standard, and this is the case with Richard. He's in a bar that is known for alcohol, which is not only tempting him to spiral back into his addiction, but a guilty pleasure of his. That, but being so close to alcohol, reminds him of the shooting of Stefan. Johan decides to change the environment to better suit Richard's standard and also makes him more comfortable. Johan and Richard begin to walk, and Johan begins to prod at Richard again as he explains Stefan's past to him, as well as how and why his death was unfair and unjust. Kinderheim 511 was a horrible place that psychologically broke children and made some of them into monsters, unfit to live and work normally in society. Stefan was one of them, and by Richard Brandt shooting him, he was essentially never given a chance. Johan continues to use words like execute and boy to make Richard guilty. Johan even goes as far as to mention his daughter, and by doing so, he lets Richard's mind race. I never gave that boy a chance. Would I be able to do the same for my daughter? Was I wrong to not give that boy a chance? The seed of doubt are slowly being planted into Richard's head. Johan once again changes the environment to prevent Richard from feeling the need to escape. The scene then changes on the rooftop, with Johan dropping the revelation that he's done research on the case and Richard was never seen drinking at a bar on the day of Stefan's execution. Johan adds fuel to the fire and essentially scrambles any sense of logic and reasoning that Richard had left by telling him he was calm, sober, and wanted to execute Stefan. Johan asks him even more questions like, why are you trying to forget? Or are you just lying? Are you lying to others? Did you confirm the boy's crimes? Did you have the right to execute him? Do you think that by lying, your sins will go away? The final nail in the coffin is when Johan asks Richard, can a man who has sinned really meet with his daughter and turn his life around? Johan has successfully isolated Richard and gaslighted him into believing he will never change and is alone. The scenery does an amazing job of further convincing Richard. It's nothing more than a pitch black night sky, the coldness of the Germany's air, and nothing except a monster ready to devour him into eternal darkness. The only thing that's seemingly keeping Richard company is a bottle of whiskey. Johan offers Richard a drink, knowing he used to suffer with alcoholism as well as knowing alcohol is his guilty pleasure. Johan is offering Richard a way out, an escape route from the misery that is the world. Nobody is coming to save him, and he certainly can't save himself. So why bother changing? Why bother do anything except feed his addiction? Richard accepts the drink, feeds his addiction, and ultimately commits suicide by falling from the rooftop. Johan leverages fear, guilt, and despair to influence decisions, creating a symbiotic relationship between negative emotion and his influence. He figures out his victims' deepest, darkest secrets and hangs it over their head, guilt-tripping them into believing they can never recover and there's only one answer. That is death. He targets personal vulnerabilities for tailored manipulation, exploiting uncertainty or physical danger to induce compliance. So, after analyzing all the ways that these characters use manipulation in their strategies and plans, whose manipulation do you think is the best? I can't say much about why it's not as close as you think, but I can assure you that the feats speak for themselves. But the real question is, do you agree?